Hi, I'm Rob Price, and I'm talking to some inspirational leaders of some of the leading AI and Gen AI businesses in the world. Welcome to Futurise.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm David Doyle. Along with Alex Miller, I'm co-founder of Forestreet. And Forestreet, the genesis of Forestreet was that Alex and I worked on different sides of the sort of the technology advice divide. I was a partner at one of the big four. I led the data analytics practice, and Alex was a sort of consumer of that sort of research and advice. He was on the group board at Lloyds Bank, and formerly COO of Octopus Investments. And we felt that the research industry, the technology research industry, as we knew it, was not where it should be, really, for a couple of reasons. First of all, that was it was an independent challenge, and I recognize that as a partner in a firm. You tend to want to give advice that leads to the sale downstream. And the second one was just a cognitive constraint, which really there was such an explosion in technology and categories of technology that the idea that one sort of grey-haired eminence could really keep track of everything that was moving just seemed wrong. So I thought it was a data analytics opportunity, and we also thought there's a potential sort of chance to reframe this and sort of a genuine independent view of it, which wasn't driven by further sales. We just focus on this one job, and that's Forestreet, which started in 2017, and here we are.
And in essence, I understand Forestreet to be your magic, if you like, is to use a mix of that data analytics and AI and generative AI to work out for any category, however niche, however specific, who the players are to talk to in any particular geography, whether that's global or regional. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a combination of open source. We buy in data as well, but you're absolutely right. The idea is that you should be able to stand up a vendor map, what a procurement person would call a category capability assessment in minutes, basically. The kind of thing you might have traditionally sort of given a consultant a few weeks to do and come back. And the idea is that we do that straight away. We can do it regardless of language. We can do it regardless of location, and that transforms the information advantage that typically sellers have into the corporations we work with. They sort of understand the market very quickly and understand what their options might be, which aren't necessarily going to be the widget they thought at the start of the question.
So for people
Yeah.
listening, I guess those should be interested are those that operate within a business around supply chain, around a procurement function, or indeed just somebody within the business who's thinking, how do I get access to the best widget provider or whatever it is that they want?
Yeah, that's right. There's typically three use cases, although we keep stumbling into new ones. I mean, businesses are always trying to find resources. That's the problem that we solve. But the three that we typically focus on would be: first, we actually work for a number of the sort of big consultancy companies who sort of supercharge some of their advice with our tool. We work for procurement professionals, so category managers, procurement leaders who need to understand a new category very quickly. A good example recently, one of our clients is a distiller that was looking to find sustainable labeling solutions for their bottles, right? So it's a great example. What is sustainable labeling? Where do I find it? What different types are out there? And is it a market that can support a big organization like us? And then the final one, actually, which you came to late, was origination. So investment companies who are trying to find organizations with the right characteristics to invest in. So, again, plays to our strongest point, which is probably the sort of the software market. So you want to find another company like Forestreet. Okay, how many other companies exist like Forestreet? It was interesting. We did our own due diligence. The company that did commercial due diligence on us found about 15 companies they saw as competitors, and we sent them back a list of 200. So it's sort of, so we've got that. We can give a really rich picture, and as I said to you before, and give a global picture as well in terms of what's the competitive landscape like, and have you really got a unique opportunity, or is there is a lot of other stuff out there that looks similar? That's the secret sauce.
When we talked previously, I think the thing that I walked away from was thinking, I can imagine that there would be questions that I would ask because I'm intrigued at a point of need, and your system, your product would kind of provide an answer that I would look at in marvel, as I did. How are you finding it embeds in day-to-day usage by those businesses? So that continued use, because I guess that's the thing that justifies the investment for an organization looking to embed it in their operating model.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question actually, and I think so in some ways, we're an alternative to Google, right? So that's a sort of, but does that justify the business case? It does at moments of urgency, right? Because you've got an urgent problem. But one of the things that we've evolved to do is just understand a little bit more about that context. Where do we fit in the architecture or the workflow of an organization? And I think at first, to be honest, I think we're a little bit naive about that. We just thought we did this really cool thing. Surely everyone's going to want it. And of course, people have a number of options that are looking at any time. They've got to make choices about their priorities at any given moment. So we're working on that, and you can see that really starting to happen actually in say take the consulting space as an example. We've now got an example. We're actually embedded on one of our clients' websites. Okay, so they sort of they do technology scouting, and if you come into first step you take in sort of engaging them on a technology scouting mission is you go into the Forestreet platform, and then you get an initial set of results which helps you to shape your thinking. So that's one way we're sort of learning over there. Again, in the procurement space, I think we're starting to understand that there's now this really interesting idea of ecosystem management. So I've got vendors that I'm working with right now, and I've got vendors that I might be contracting with shortly, and then there's this whole ecosystem out there that I might be interested in. And if an emergency happens, or if I'm just thinking about where do I, what's my transformation map look like, I want to keep a track of them. And now we're finding with like one of the big corporates we work with is now starting to use this in that context, keeping a view on all their options basically. So I think it's an interesting perspective to take on this sort of idea that there are vendors I work with, and then there are vendors I might work with, and I start to think really quite actively about them. And in the origination space, I think it's sometimes more that there are dedicated researchers, and that's a little bit simpler ask. There are people that spend their life doing origination tasks. Find me 100 companies that B2B SaaS companies in Europe that do this thing. And so so it fits more comfortably in that. But I think it's definitely been a learning for us. We came out with a shiny bit of tech and said, isn't it amazing? And it's taken us a bit of a while to be more mature and sophisticated in terms of this is how it will consistently add value in your process and your organization.
So if you look at the way in which the technology is used, in essence, you source data, lots of data, find data, so data analytics piece, probably use kind of AI in some of the interpretation of that, and then you use generative AI in the production of reports in terms of outputs from that. So let's talk about AI ethics and data ethics kind of. So how does that play a part in your organization? How do you think about ensuring that the information that's presented is correct, is not subject to bias, etc.?
Yeah, so good question, and it's a question with many parts to the answer. So an umbrella, since we actually set the business up as a B corporation because we were, our ambition was we're going to do this the right way. We've got a view in terms of how we should do it. How that manifests itself is in many different ways. What we don't, for instance, we don't go near personal data, for example, even though we've been asked a lot of times. We found this fantastic vendor. Could you give us some information about the CEO or the board, etc.? And we stayed away from that basically because it takes us into a difficult area. We decided actually we're not sure how to do it. We feel like we're going into grey area, so we stayed out of it. We also kind of work really hard on being data driven, again, in terms of that's simple because it's one of the founding principles of the business, right? We are data driven as opposed to opinion or proximity driven. So when we build our algorithms, we sort of test so that they're giving sort of objective and predictable answers. We understand where there are information gaps. We wait for those. We wait specifically for information gaps within the algorithm, so we don't sort of we don't always end up being driven to the same way that Google might be, which is the people that are really good at SEO, etc. So it's a design principle of what we do that we push against all of the commercial drivers that are going the other way, of which, if you're just reading the first page of any sort of set of Google responses would tell you what those drivers are. So it's embedded in what we do, but it's moving really fast. So we're dancing around this all the time, basically, get incredible sort of insight and information. You think, can we deploy that? It's impactful, but is it aligned with what we're trying to do? So, it's a question that doesn't rest.
And that's the perfect question that every organization, of course, should be asking themselves, because as you've said, the pace of change of the frameworks or the regulation is changing all the time, and especially in different geographies. So for those operating in multiple geographies, then obviously that flows through. In terms of thinking about people, talent within the organization. So I think one of the things that I'm finding in the conversation so far is that we're an AI business. We're doing cool things with generative AI and data, and therefore people want to work for us. But what are your thoughts in terms of bringing the right people into the organization and finding access to the spread of experience, ethics, for example, included from the last conversation, that enables you to achieve the growth that you want?
Well, I'm going to have to give a shout out, first of all, to the kind of younger generation of the workforce, that they're certainly more ethical in terms of how they approach it than I might have done at the beginning of my corporate career. So that's actually makes things easier. In terms of the types of people, I actually don't think that's too different from before, because we're very focused on, and I always have been focused on judgment. What are you looking for in people? Even your data scientists, we've had our kind of our spread of data scientists and AI experts. And I'd still reflect back, if you get a sense of their judgment, right? Saying when they don't know, that's just such an important signal. It says, I'm not sure. I am going to research to find out whether I'm going down the right path in the right direction, and I've got some concerns. If they flag that, you sort of think, well, that's the best you can ask for. And I think that applies that applies in the commercial side of the business equally, but in this sort of data science space, I think, and AI particularly, it's kind of that's really key. Know what you don't know. Say when you're worried, and then best you can ever do is work it through. But let's be clear. I mean, we don't have the ethical dilemmas of someone working for, say, OpenAI. Basically, look, he's trying to sort of saying, I'm on the brink of general intelligence.
Yeah.
What do I do? My shareholders are saying, actually go for it, because that's the end of the competition. We don't have those kind of almost existential type questions to deal with, luckily.
And more broadly, though, David, in terms of just kind of talent across the business, because you're London-based, aren't you? In terms
Yes.
So that's that being the focus for the moment, in terms of just get the right people in the office, hybrid, different geographies.
I think in the office. I think there's that for now. We do a hybrid model, but I think we might have made a slight mistake in terms of being too generous in terms of time away from the office, because we're a young company, we're growing, we're taking new people on. The ability to embed culture, it's exhausting on Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be. And back to that point I made previously, the idea of those kind of informal conversations about finding out, again, ethically, how are people applying what they're doing? Are they understand the business we're aspiring to be? That's not all broadcast. That has to be a dialogue, and doing the dialogue through a series of sort of Zoom calls that are all scheduled, etc., just very inorganic. So I think in terms of how we build the right kind of company, how we deploy the technology in an effective and ethical way, I think that's a feeling as much as it is a set of principles. And I think you have to be here and be exposed to it. Virtue untested, as they say, is no virtue. You've got to be in the conversation to understand how to steer it.
Cool. And so we set off the conversation talking about the opportunity you saw to disrupt a market. How about the vision then? So where are you now in terms of thinking about your 5-year vision? What do you want to be? What does great look like?
Great goes back to the first, where we started, actually. It's been remarkably consistent given all the ups and downs on the journey, which is, we think, if you take the research industry generally, but let's just say the technology research industry, our vision is still to transform it, right? Our vision is still to make the user the expert, to give them 80% of that expertise on demand. But we don't want to replace people that really know stuff. We just want to replace that kind of the grunt work that used to outsource. Someone has to spend weeks and weeks and weeks just pulling together different bits of data, and it was effectively a human middleware, trying to sort of synthesize lots of different bits of data into something meaningful, putting a nice wrapper around it. Our job is to take the first 8 miles of that 10-mile journey and crunch it into minutes. And then you can start to apply, the clever stuff. It's exactly the way that people are sort of using sort of the open AIs, et cetera, as a sort of, it's an assistant. It helps superpower your ability to make informed decisions, not to replace you.
Absolutely. And accelerate and augment is a kind of common theme through a lot of these conversations. David,
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Forestreet today.
Pleasure.